Hello, good morning, everybody. We are starting our morning session. And if yesterday I had the pleasure to introduce John Wilkin, who is really a key player in US and internationally. I also now today it's really a pleasure to introduce Pierre-Yves Le Trahan. You have to realize, students in the school, how fortunate we are all to have them, these kind of people here. They are changing, and they have changed the oceanography. Let me tell you, now that they don't hear, I can tell you this. Pierre-Yves has been instrumental, for example, really in leading and in co-leading. Of course, all this is international work, but Pierre-Yves in particular has been leading the developments in operational oceanography, at least in two very substantial elements, and now actually leading a third one. First leading Argo and the Argo development internationally, and now EuroArgo. Then second leading the satellite developments in Europe, in France and in Europe, and now also leading the Copernicus Marine Service and providing the links between the operational and the scientific community. So I think we are really fortunate, and I thank you very much, Pierre-Yves, and look forward your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. Okay, so the title of the lecture this morning is Satellite and Operational Oceanography. It will be an overview of the satellite and operational oceanography, and you already actually had already yesterday more detailed lectures on the different elements. So you had the scatterometry yesterday. You will have today, SST, surface salinity, and ocean color. So the outline of the lecture is first, I will remind you the essential role of satellite observation for operational oceanography. And I will then detail the principles, the different techniques, for observing the ocean from space. I will slightly detail, three techniques which are, probably the most important one for operational oceanography in the sense that those really data are really used in ocean models, both for physics and biogeochemistry, so altimetry, SST, and ocean color. And I will briefly go through the different other techniques, synthetic and partial radar, CIS, scatterometry, sea surface salinity. And again, you will be exposed to more detailed lecture on these elements. It's just an overview for you to have this global picture of this satellite observation. I will then detail the requirement for satellite observation for the operational oceanography perspective. So what do we need as observation to constrain ocean model for ocean analysis and forecasting? And I will detail as a conclusion the different techniques that are used to assess the impact of satellite observation in ocean forecasting models. So this is, you know that already. This was presented by Andreas Schiller. Just to remind you that this is, we are dealing here with operational oceanography. And this is integrated approach. So here, which means using satellite in situ observation on models together with services to describe and forecast the ocean. So this has been a major development over the past 20 years, and this figure is very well known, and we are focusing here, I don't know if you can read, but this is spatial observation, how they fit together with model in situ to provide services and application, and this will be the focus of this presentation. And we are dealing with a wide range of applications. So again, this was presented yesterday, but just to remind that we are here discussing how satellite observation can constrain ocean models, both for physics and biogeochemistry, to serve a wide range of applications, be they for climate, ocean health, and ocean services. So it's not only real time, but it's also for assessing the state of the ocean and the health of the ocean. So the two pillars, the main pillar for operational oceanography system are observation. So you cannot run any operational oceanography system without observation. So either from both from satellite and in situ. So they're really essential. They're really the building block of the system. So of course, when dealing with operational oceanography on ocean services, you need a sustained observing system. You cannot develop services, operational services, if you have not a sustained operational observing system. So as we actually briefly discussed yesterday evening, we are using for operational oceanography the same backbone system, both for climate and operational oceanography, the system which at the international level is defined on through GOOS, GCOS, and also JCOM, which is a joint commission between WMO and IOC. This is for the global component, and we have all these regional components which are developed through the GOOS Regional Alliance. One specificity of operational oceanography still is that there is a need for high, space and time resolution observation, and also real time, which is needed for operational oceanography applications. Okay, this is the picture that we discussed already yesterday. So this is a global system. So we have in-situ observation, we have satellite observation. This is an integrated system. So the design was done almost 20 years ago with some guidelines for the development of an initial system. And I will go through some possible evolution. But you will see here the main techniques that we are discussing here today from space and how they are integrated with this global system with in-situ observation, with Argo drifters, moorings, and so on. And this was the guidelines that were discussed in a previous OceanOps conference. And you see the status today, which for the in-situ system with all these different elements, which could appear that the ocean is full of in-situ observation. I will, although my lecture today is on satellite, just stress again how important is the in-situ component. You cannot really work without a sufficiently dense in-situ observing system, and we do have gaps because those dots, are very small actually in the ocean. Okay, so the satellite and operational oceanography. So they really provide a unique contribution. Why? Because you can measure from space key parameters which are needed to constrain global, regional, coastal ocean models through data assimilation. So you can get access to sea level and ocean current, sea surface temperature, ocean color, sea ice, waves, sea surface salinity. So the main, for what we are discussing here, the main contribution is constraining ocean models through data assimilation. But also you have satellite observation that can be used and are used to validate ocean models. In some cases, satellite data can be directly used for applications. So we have, for instance, for the use of SAR, so high-resolution images from the ocean that are used directly for marine safety, pollution monitoring, detection of oil, for instance, or even ocean color for water quality. So the key aspect, aspect of satellite observation is first they are global, they are real-time, and high space and time resolution. And obviously, they need to be complemented by an in-situ observing system, as we are discussing an integrated system. Okay, if you look more in the different techniques, so that we'll detail. So first of all, it was really a key ingredient in the development of operational oceanography is satellite altimetry. So I will give you a more detailed lecture on altimetry later on, and Rosemary Moreau will detail the new techniques for satellite altimetry. But there is a key element for the system we are using in operational oceanography. So altimetry provides you information on sea level, on ocean current, the geostrophic component of the ocean. So sea surface temperature, ocean color. You have the SAR data that provide a surface roughness. We can derive wave, winds, oil slick, even surface current. Sea ice are essential for many applications for the polar seas. So again, this is a concentration, sea ice type, drift, thickness, and so on winds. If you look on the in-situ data, so first of all, when dealing with satellite observation, you need in-situ observation to calibrate the satellite observation. If we look at the detail of the different satellite techniques, in many cases, most of the algorithms that are used to transform satellite observation into geophysical quantities, they are partly based on in-situ satellite comparison. So this is the calibration through in-situ observation is first key. We also need in situ to validate satellite observation and to monitor the long-term stability of satellite observation. A very good example is what is done currently today with altimetry and tide gauge. You monitor, as you know, you are monitoring with the mean sea level rise very precisely from satellite observation, but you need independent check that you can really measure the mean sea level rise with an accuracy which is better than 1 millimeter per year. But the most important part of in situ is really to complement satellite observation to provide measurement of the ocean interior. So satellite measures the sea surface. In some cases, I will detail this afternoon that if you take the example of sea level, it's not only a surface measure because it also reflects the ocean interior, but still you really need to complement those satellite observations with in-situ observation to describe the ocean interior. And it is through the data assimilation techniques that will be detailed later on during this summer school that you can really have the joint use between the high resolution observation from satellite with in situ to provide a four-dimensional high resolution description of the ocean state. And an excellent example, outstanding example, is what is done today between Argo and satellite altimetry, where really the two techniques are merged together in high resolution ocean models to describe the ocean state at a high resolution. So going through the different techniques that we go through now, there are two main types of techniques in ocean remote sensing. So the first is the passive techniques. On passive techniques, you measure the natural radiation which is emitted from the sea or reflected solar radiation. And you have active techniques or radar. And that's in those techniques. So we send a signal, from the satellite, and there is a measure of the signal received after its reflection at the sea surface. In both cases, and this is what makes it a bit difficult, through these techniques, you need to take into account the propagation of the signal in the atmosphere, the emission from the atmosphere itself, to isolate the sea surface signal, which characterize the state of the ocean. And you have both the intensity, frequency distribution of the radiation that is emitted or reflected from the sea, which allows inference of its property, BBM, for instance, salinity, temperature, and so on. And the polarization of the radiation is also often used. There is a third category which doesn't fit with the 2-1, which is actually very important for operational oceanography, is a gravimetry satellite. So the gravimetry satellites, they measure the Earth's gravity field and its variation. And we'll see later on that for altimetry, it's essential to get an estimation of the mean ocean circulation. So this is a particular case here, and we have two recent development with the GRACE and GOES gravity mission. Okay, if you look to different techniques, so depending on the wavelength and frequency, so we start with a visible wavelength. So this is, you analyze the solar radiation reflected by the sea surface. This is the ocean color, the color of the sea, and that's extremely important observation for measuring the green part of the ocean. You have infrared radiometer, so they measure around 10 micrometers, so the thermal emission of the sea. And you have all the series of microwave radiometers from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeter in wavelengths, and then you can get sea surface salinity, SST, sea ice, and wind. On the radar, they are really in the range of 3 to 30 gigahertz, so it's 1 centimeter, 10 centimeter wavelengths, and you have the altimeter, so this is sea level, wind and waves, scatterometer, so we were discussed yesterday by Mark, which is so wind, but also information on sea ice, and synthetic aperture radars, which is sea surface roughness, from which you can derive many different parameters. So when choosing the different wavelengths for satellite observing technique, you cannot choose any wavelengths. So you have first, there are some particularly if you look at the microwave band, some frequencies are not authorized for Earth observation, so you have to be very selective. And of course, you need to take into account the propagation through the atmosphere, which gives you only a limited window, to have observation from space. So in the visible for ocean color, in the infrared radiometry. So this is where you have window for the atmospheric transmission, on the microwave on the radar. Okay, one aspect is that the ocean signal that you receive, from the satellite in remote sensing, is only and often a very small component of the total signal received by your satellite. Here, this is just a figure for the when you measure the ocean color of the satellite, you see that what you measure from the satellite, you receive. The surface is what is interesting for us is really what is the color of the sea, but you will receive many other signals. From the atmosphere itself, from reflection, from clouds, and so on. And really, the difficulty of those techniques is to make sure that you can extract easily the signal from the ocean. So if we go to this passive sensor solar radiation, so this is what we do for ocean color. So this is visible near infrared wavelengths. This is multispectral because this is what is needed to detect ocean colors. So this is HIMAGIS, so you have scanning system. There is a problem of clouds, so you don't see the ocean, you don't see through clouds, and you measure the water property which colors the seas. If you look at a passive sensor, this is just emitting radiation, so not the solar radiation which is reflected at the surface. So you have the thermal infrared radiometer. Again, we use multiple wavebands to extract the ocean signal and to correct for the atmosphere. Measure sea surface temperature. On microwave radiometer, one specificity of microwave radiometer is you can see through the clouds, which makes these techniques extremely useful for many applications that we have. It's a lower resolution, but you see through the clouds. So a few, very brief theory on the radiation, which is just to illustrate how you extract ocean parameters from this emission of the sea. So remember, so we have a discussion of black body. So black body is a body that absorbs all the radiation it receives, and it also emits radiation at the maximum rate for its given temperatures. This is on this energy emission rate is given by different laws. So the Planck law, which provides the wavelength-dependent emission, the total energy given by the Stefan Boltzmann law, and the Wien's law, which is a peak emission wavelength. Those are ideal body. In practice, we have a gray body. That is not a perfectly black body, and this is and it emits only a fraction of what would do a black body. So this is the famous Planck's law, which describes the rate of energy through a black body. You have a different curve for different of the temperature. Main point is the total emission is a strong function of temperature, that it's also very sensitive to the wavelengths. And we define, the brightness temperature is a physical temperature for a black body. This is a notion in a remote sensing, which is often used, brightness temperature, which corresponds to the temperature of a black body. So we have this example of emission spectrum, and if you take the sun, this is a given temperature of the sun, you will have the maximum emission from the sun, which is in the visible wavelengths, which is what you see, when we have a nice weather outside. On the contrary, if you look at the Earth, which mean temperature is of course much smaller, you have a maximum energy which is around the infrared band. So if you integrate this Planck law across all wavelengths, you will find that the total rate of emission, which is proportional to the temperature to the force, and this is a Stefan Boltzmann law, which you see very high dependency on temperature. If you take a gray body, so that's often for most of the body, so we define the emissivity, which is the relation between the emission compared to a black body. So if we have black body, you have emissivity is equal to 1, but in practice it's less to n. And this is a key parameter for ocean remote sensing, because this is the emissivity. It depends on the ocean surface characteristics, so temperature, surface roughness, salinity, permittivity, and foam. And we have the emissivity, which is equal to the absorbance, because this is a Kirchhoff law. If you receive energy, you are in thermal equilibrium, you need to absorb the emission is equal to the absorption. Just a few on the technique, which are very much used in all these remote sensing, ocean remote sensing activities, is really when you measure these brightness temperatures, and you use a complex retrieval algorithm to estimate the ocean parameters of interest. And this is done through radiative transfer models. We compute the brightness temperature measured by the satellite as a function of these variables. On these radiative transfer models, they comprise a model of the sea surface emissivity, so which characterize the ocean surface, and a model for the absorption in the atmosphere. And so without going into detail, but different techniques, if you want to retrieve a given parameter, you use this model, and you go through the inverse model to minimize the differences between measured and simulated through a radiative transfer model brightness temperatures. And this gives you the observation. If we move now to active sensors of radar, so we have different techniques. So first, I mean, we have techniques when the radar is emitting obliquely, and that's scatterometry that you were discussed yesterday on imaging radar with the SAR and synthetic aperture radars. And you have techniques where you just measure at the vertical, and this is radar altimetry, when you measure the timing and return dictate the distance from the surface. On the orbits, very rapidly, so we have different types of orbit for satellites. I mean, very important orbits are the geostationary orbit, when the satellite sees the same Earth's surface every day. I mean, this is large force measurements. You have a very high altitude, but this allows to have very frequent observations. So typically, I mean, 10, 15 minutes, you see a snapshot of the ocean. And you have polar and inclined orbits, so period of about 1 or 2 hours. So they go around the Earth and they scan the Earth several times a day. And with a special case of a sun synchronous orbit when you have the same local solar time. Depending on instrument type, either you measure just along track, this is what you have from altimetry, or you measure along a swath, which depends again of the technique. The resolutions is also a key element of the satellite technique, and they really usually depends on the antenna size and wavelengths. So we are at low resolution and microwave, typically 50, 100 kilometers. I will detail later on that radar altimeter has a bit specific techniques because they are not being limited but pulse emitted. But this is just an illustration. I mean, depending the side of your footprint depend on your antenna diameter, on the wavelength. So with a very this is also just simple relationship, but just to illustrate, if you are at 3 gigahertz, which is a wavelength of 10 centimeter, and for a satellite at 1,000 kilometer on an antenna diameter of 1 meter, the footprint will be 100 kilometer. So if you want to reduce this footprint to only 10 kilometer, that will mean that you would need an antenna of 10 meters, which again, it's a technology highly challenging, and the cost, of course, to a satellite will be much higher. On the contrary, if you have a higher frequency, I mean, you have a better resolution because the wavelength is smaller, and you have this ratio, I mean, wavelength diameter, which is more interesting. Okay, a few words on the satellite data processing. This is taken from the book of Ian Robinson. Just when we go through the processing of satellite observations, so there are different level of products from level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, and even level 4. I will discuss rapidly afterwards that what we do for the data assimilation. I mean, important aspect is the level 2 here is when we arrive to a geophysical quantity. This is just sea level, wind, and so on. On level 3, when you do some reprocessing of the data. Level 4 will be more when you start to merge data with other data sets. So data assembly, data processing issue for operational oceanography. This is an important topic. So you will have many examples, I assume in the next week, on how sensitive the data assimilation system are to the quality of the input data sets. So this is something which is very important when you develop and use a different system, that depending on the quality of your initial input data, your result for an ocean forecast and so on will be very dependent on. So there are a lot of data processing needs from operational oceanography, which I will just illustrate rapidly. So one aspect which is key to understand is so there are different data streams for satellite observation. You cannot process satellite observation in real time with the same accuracy that you would get in delay mode if you take the time to wait for instance, better atmospheric correction on reprocessing of the data. So there are very important difference in quality between real-time and delay mode data sets. So if you are planning to use a satellite observation for real-time systems, so of course you have to use real-time observation. But if you do, and this is often the case for important application of operational oceanography, this is more if you want to do an assessment of the past 20 or 30 years through reanalysis and so on, it's essential that you use offline product, delay mode product, which are more, which have a better quality. Error characterization is essential, again, for data assimilation. You will see this is an important input for the data assimilation to know, to characterize the measurement error of your system. And then the issue of assimilation, again, I'm sure that you will be exposed to this over the next couple of days. If you look in theory, I mean, on for advanced data assimilation, it's much better that you assimilate rather raw satellite products. So typically level 1B or level 2, because this is, in that case, the data structure is more easily defined and less complex. And this is the model on the assimilation that should do the high-level processing. In practice, and we see this is not always true because depending on the techniques, you need to have some high-level data processing. Let's say correcting biases of large-scale error. So I will illustrate that with Altimetry this afternoon. And this cannot be easily done in a complex data assimilation system. So we have the theory that, okay, it's better to use level 2 or even level 1B data for data assimilation. In practice, you have to be to adapt depending on your assimilation system. One example is we have still many data assimilation systems that are using SST maps. So this is a level 3 or level 4 product as input data set for assimilation rather than assimilating level 2 C-surface data. Okay, I will go very rapidly through different techniques as you will be, anyways, they will be discussed later on. So starting with satellite altimetry. It is actually one of the most essential observing techniques required to monitor and forecast the state of the oceans. A key aspect for sea level, sea level is directly related to ocean circulation and through the geostrophy approximation. So, but it's also sea level is an integral of the ocean interior. We will explain this afternoon that sea level, I mean, is a large part of the sea level is just an integral of the over the vertical of the density anomaly. This explains why when you assimilate sea level in ocean model, it's a really strong constraint to infer the four-dimensional ocean circulation. And it's, of course, an essential technique to constrain mesoscale circulation. So this is different missions that we have. On the two aspects here that you need the reference high-quality mission on some complementary mission. And you will have this afternoon or tomorrow a presentation by Rosemary on this future swath altimetry with SWOT. Techniques with altimetry, so you measure the distance between the satellite and the sea surface. I mean, this is, in principle, very simple as a technique. It's actually highly challenging in terms of accuracy because you want to measure the distance between the satellite and the surface of the ocean with an accuracy of about 1 centimeter when the satellite is flying at 1,000 kilometers. So it's highly challenging in terms of accuracy, and you also need to know precisely the position of the satellite because what you need is to get the sea level with respect to reference surface. So I will discuss this afternoon more in detail, so I skip this one. But the basic quantities that we measure with satellite altimetry is what you measure is the sea surface height, which is dynamic topography plus geoid. Geoid is an equipotential of the Earth's gravity field. And the signal of interest for us here is dynamic topography. So you need a good geoid model to extract the dynamic topography. I will explain you how we do it. And then you get this type of observation from altimetry, which is the sea level with respect to the geoid, typically variation between minus 1 meter to about 1 meter, and this is reflects the main currents and so on. So sea surface temperature is also an extremely important variable for assimilation in ocean models. So it characterizes both first the mesoscale variability of the upper ocean, but it's really a key property for Earth-sea interaction process. So it's essential to correct your error in forcing film when you do the assimilation. So it's so SST are also often directly used for operational survey applications. So in some cases you have maps of SST at high resolutions that are used. Again, a wide range of techniques that will be discussed later on by Tony, both on the infrared, microwave, and geostationary techniques. You have often see this very nice picture of the sea surface temperature, but this you can get picture like this only once every 2 or 3 years when you have a totally cloud-free region. So you get very fine-scale observation, which are very important to detail not only the mesoscale but also all the discussion on this sub-mesoscale. But this is highly limited by the cloud cover. important fact here that the techniques that are used for SST really is merging different techniques. So you are using, polar orbiting infrared, geostationary infrared, which is really crucial for high temporal resolution, and get rid actually of the cloud because you visit every 15 minutes, you see the same area. On microwave polar orbiting because this is always a capability. Within the GODAI, initially the GODAI high resolution SST pilot project, which is now the global high resolution sea surface temperature project. There will be a lot of work done by the community to agree on precise definition of what you measure, what is the sea surface temperature, and when you measure from a satellite. And all this discussion of skin surface temperature, sub-skin, effect of diurnal effect, and so on, it's extremely important so that there is a good understanding of what you measure and how afterwards you can constrain an ocean model with sea surface temperature data. Ocean color, again, fundamental observation to characterize the green component of the ocean. And one of the big challenges for operational oceanography for the next decade will be to develop this green component of operational oceanography with the same accuracy and knowledge that we have for the physics. And without observation, it's impossible. So ocean color has a major place and will have a major role to play. And this provides you global monitoring of chlorophyll. But also, it's you have also other contribution which I will not detail too much here. So again, different mission. Something here to mention, which is something which is this Korean satellite, which is a first geostationary satellite for ocean color, which again is something very important to be developed on a broader scale. Okay, the basic principle, I think there will be a detail in other lecture, but okay, this is good that maybe that you have some repetition here just so that you can, if you are not familiar with the different technique, but the principle of the color, measuring the color of the sea, that you have the sunlight that enters the oceans, and then this light is absorbed, scattered, and reflected by phytoplankton and other material, and suspended material, and so on. And this is what you will measure afterward from a satellite, but you also need to correct all the other effects. I explained you 10 minutes ago, what we have. And in practice, more than 80% of the signal received by the satellite is not coming from the surface of the ocean, so you have to correct it. So atmospheric correction is key to get a precise estimation of the ocean color, which means that in your choice of your sensor, you need to have a series of spectral bands, in particular in the red, near infrared, to correct from atmospheric signal. Important to notice as well that unlike observation in the infrared, where the radiation is really coming from a thin, very thin surface of the ocean, for ocean color, you see the signal reflects in the blue-green signal from the few tenths of meter. Okay, and then if you look at the source of ocean color variation, the main one is the phytoplankton, but you also measure dissolved organic material and suspended particle matter. So in particular in coastal zone. So there is a lot of difficulty when you want to assess to extract these different data sets, depending when you are in the open ocean. So because the case one water and in this coastal ocean, which is much more complex, the color of the sea much more complex, and it's actually much more challenging to extract the different components. And this is, so the key parameter for ocean color is what you call the reflectance, which is the ratio between the radiance which is emitted from beneath the ocean surface, dividing by the downwelling solar irradiance. So you see this, and this is where you get, chlorophyll, suspended matters, and yellow substances, and dissolved organic matter. And you can get thicker ledger on chlorophyll, suspended matters. Again, a lot of application, for the different parameters for at regional scale. More briefly on the other techniques. So ice is again a fundamental parameters to be observed from space. And you measure the sea ice concentration. So this has been measured for the last 35 years. This is essential observation of the sea ice concentration by microwave, but also sea ice type, sea ice drift. Again, microwave scatterometer on SAR. CI thickness, so we discussed yesterday. So this is done through altimetry. Today with a cryosat on in particular mission, but also with microwave, I mean for thin ice. And today there are very nice products coming which merge, I mean microwave on altimeter between, so microwave from SMOS on altimeter from cryosat on the SAR as well. Sea surface salinities from space. Again, Tony will give you a detailed lecture of this. This is really a challenge for operational oceanography. So we have 2 missions that have been flying. SMOS is still flying. I mean, the demonstration of the feasibility of measuring sea surface salinity from space has been done. Still, I mean, the impact for operational oceanography is still to be fully quantified. So, I mean, we know how to assimilate those data sets, but I mean, there is issue of accuracy before moving to operational system for sea surface salinity. Still, a lot of very nice, I mean, outstanding scientific results have been achieved with the sea surface salinity from space. You have here one example from Nicolas Roy, which is characterizing the Gulf Stream sea surface salinity and comparing with velocity derived from altimetry. And you see, I mean, many interesting features that can be resolved with SMOS. And SMOS is a particle sensor because it has a resolution of about 50 kilometers, but a larger noise. Another example here on a different signal you can retrieve with 5 years of SMOS, and you will see regions which are quite interesting here when you look really at the river mouth, and when you have really large variation of sea surface salinity, which are actually very important to characterize the input of the river on the ocean. And you see this different. This is a blue curve. You see the evolution of salinity that can really be very well monitored with SMOS. SAR. So this is again microwave radar. Working with the frequency 1 to 15 gigahertz. This is and they are using the synthetic aperture radar. So as I explained you that the footprint of a satellite observation depends on the diameter of the antenna on the wavelengths. On the principle for synthetic aperture radar, so you are using actually a very large antenna, which is synthetic in the sense that it just when your satellite moves, you are using this displacement to create a very large synthetic antenna, which for the SAR is typically 20 kilometers. As a result, you can get very high resolution of this through a very complex machinery of SAR processing. And with SAR, I mean, it's a very powerful techniques because you measure the ocean surface roughness, which is influenced by many parameters: wind, waves, currents, ocean leaks, sea ice, and you can try to derive, I mean, all these effects. So the SAR see mainly the Bragg wave, which is a resonant wave with the corresponding to the wavelengths of the radar, and then they are modulated. Those waves are modulated by different phenomena. This is why you can really derive all these parameters from a SAR observation. And you have all this. On one aspect which was developed more recently on the capability to observe ocean surface current from SAR, and a lot of perspective on the longer run to derive ocean current from space through this technology. We have in Europe, I mean, 2 missions today with the Sentinel-1 A and B, which has been this is an operational system. On just to explain here that it's also a complex system in the sense that your instrument has different operating mode, and so it has different mode depending on the surface it sees. And typically, over the ocean, the SAR is often just looking at the wave, so there is a wave mode, but also different modes for observing the sea ice and so on. And we, as part of Copernicus Marine Service, for instance, we are providing to our user precise maps of sea ice cover, sea ice thickness, which are derived from the SAR imagery. Wind stress, so as detailed yesterday, I think we'll not say a few words except as was very nicely illustrated yesterday by Mark. I mean, that is very important. You have extra information in scatterometry that you do not have yet in numerical weather prediction model. Although they assimilate the scatterometer data, they cannot retain all the information. So there's a lot of information at fine scale that you see in a scatterometry that you don't have in a numerical weather prediction model. So if we look at the requirements, so this is the last part of my lecture, is so we defined requirement for operational oceanography more than 10 years ago. I mean, this was based on this assessment of the global integrated observing system. So we have sea level, SST, ocean color, wave, sea ice, and winds. On the specific, of course, a key aspect is to have long-term systems, so continuity. On the other one is to work through international cooperation. If you want to sample the ocean with sufficient resolution, you need to have the different satellite agencies. I mean, in different countries, they work together so that they develop this idea of virtual constellation. And this is organized through this COS, which is Committee for Earth Observation Satellite. And the requirements that were given more than 10 years ago said, okay, we need for SST a combination of infrared, microwave, and to measure the SST. Microwave is essential, but you also need very precise AATSR class, which is a very precise SST measurement as a reference. Altimetry is 3 to 4 altimeters, which are required with one very precise altimeter system, which will serve as a reference for the other and for the climate. Ocean color, very important. Winds on several SAR for wave, CX characteristic and acoustic monitoring. We have been working as part of the Copernicus Marine Service on defining, revising this requirement for the next 10 years, next 20 years. On one aspect that we came through the different discussion we have had at the European level. So a key aspect for the user of operational oceanography product is there is a strong link for higher space-time resolution and also better monitoring of biogeochemical state of the ocean. I will not detail here, but one aspect that we came through was, okay, we need to go one step further for the resolution, in particular for altimetry, because this is something which has a high impact in the ocean model. This is where we are pushing for sustained long-term wide swath altimetry after the SWOT demonstration, but also geostationary ocean color will be very important for Europe. But in addition, I mean, microwave, continuity of sea ice measurement, on R&D action on very promising technique for ocean currents from space, in particular, so development that are done which I will detail at the end of my talk. Okay. In parallel, you cannot develop further the satellite observing system without significant improvement as well in the in situ. So this is again an integrated system. And we have, in particular for biogeochemistry, a key aspect is to develop biogeochemical argo on other techniques at regional scale with gliders, with ferry box and so on, because this is really where you can really improve significantly what you do for the green component of operational oceanography. Okay. Just a few slides just to explain you, but I will not detail this. I mean, how we assess the impact of satellite observation for ocean analysis and forecasting. And those are this is something which is developed through a task team of Godai OceanView. I mean, and this is something which is highly important to first verify that the observation information is optimally used in the analysis and forecasting system, to quantify the impact, but also to help defining and testing a new mission concept. And there are two main techniques that are used here. I mean, there are either observing system evaluation, which allow you to assess the impact of an existing data set on your performance of your data assimilation system. So you have the system running, which assimilate different types of observation. And you can play, the same system, you remove one observation data set, and you see how your system react and how the performance are degraded. And you have observing system simulation experiment, which help you to design new observing system. And then in OSSEs, you use different types of two different models. One model is used to perform a truth run, which is treated as if it were the real ocean. And then you assimilate this pseudo observation in another model, and then you can compare the two and see the performance of your new observing system. A key aspect of this observing system simulation experiment that needs to be calibrated, and in particular through the comparison of OSSE, you need to making sure that your simulated system is able to reproduce actual signal that you will see through an observing system evaluation. Just one example here on altimetry. This is something which is done at Mercator Océan. It's just observing system evaluation, OSE, and you have the system which is running, which is assimilating this time and for 4 altimeter missions. So you remove 1, 2, or 3 missions, and you see how the forecasts are degraded. So this is innovation scores. This is the forecast error, how they are modified depending on the number of altimeter. And you see, the impact of the altimeter on your performance of the system. Another, way to see that is just to look at the forecast skill on how, when you remove one altimeter and two altimeter, what do you gain in terms of forecast time? And typically, what we show here is that, for instance, when you move to 1 to 2 altimeter, you can get up to 4 days in your forecasting skill. That is, if with one altimeter you are able to forecast the ocean with a 1 day time lead, and with two we'll get the same score but for 4 days. So this is just a way to characterize what you have. And another one is also the sensitivity depending on the resolution of the model. And this is where this idea of going to higher resolution for the longer run is essential. Is that this is just an estimation of the 7-day forecast error, which a 1/4 global model or 1/12 global model. So we are running today 1/12 global model, but you see that the sensitivity to the force altimeter you have in the system is much more important. It's typically at the level of 20-30% instead of 10%, because a higher resolution model needs more data set to be constrained. Okay, we'll go briefly to this one. There are other techniques. They are done. It's not running OSC, but it's really analyzing the sensitivity of your system to the observation, which is called degree of freedom of system. Is simply the derivative of the analyzing how your model analysis depends on the observation. It's a very important technique, complementary technique, because you don't need to run a specific experiment, but as part of your system, you have a diagnostic on how much your observation were influential on your analysis. So just allow you to check that what was the impact of a given data set in your observation. You can have system when you put a data set on the impact is almost zero because they are not taken into account in the analysis. And this is something which is tried to be developed in most of the GODAE system to assess the routinely how the system is working and how the system is using the observation. And I will just go briefly, but one example on the observing system simulation experiment, which is done on SWOT altimetry. So this is a study which is ongoing at Mercator Ocean when we analyze the impact of the SWOT observation of analysis and forecast. Again, with a high resolution run, which is the truth of the ocean. We extract simulated observation, and then we assimilate this observation in another model. And this gives you, a way to assess how good is it? What would be the improvement you will get in your analysis and forecast if you assimilate SWOT observation compared to a conventional altimeter? And you have just here one example. This is your truth ocean that you want to reproduce. What you get if you assimilate 3 altimeter, and what you get if you altimeter 3 altimeter plus SWOT. And if you look at statistics here, you will see that on this first experiment that we did last year, that you can really improve typically your sea level forecast error. You can reduce them by 30-45% because of SWOT observation. So this is the reason why we are pushing very much to ingest SWOT data in real time when the satellite will be flying in 2021. Okay. If I summarize, just to conclude, what has been achieved in satellite oceanography over the past 10 years. So there are a lot of achievement in altimetry, on the new data set, the geoid, and so on. Assimilation of SST is also ongoing, and there is still a lot to be done. Essential contribution of SAR observation. Ocean color is really essential. Ocean color data assimilation, and you will have a specific lecture on this, is very challenging and very complex. This is the reason why this is a big lagging behind the other techniques, but it's essential. First salinity mission, so this demonstration has been done, but it's still a challenge. And a key point is that the improvement in the data assimilation methods has been really key over the past 10 years to really have a better use of observation in model. So main message here, so satellite data, they play a fundamental role for operational oceanography, improve data sets on products. If you want to assimilate correctly, it's very important that you understand sampling and error characteristics and the important role of in situ observation. This will be, probably repeated several times here, but we have to be very careful on the status of the satellite observing system when you do routinely operational oceanography. And although we have been observed rather well the ocean from space. It was not a requirement that we designed 10 years ago, was not always achieved over the past couple of years. The situation will improve, over the next decades, but still, we are also asking for more observation. International cooperation remains key. This is a need to cooperate between the different groups, and we need also well-organized scientific community. On last slide, what needs to be done next on satellite remote sensing? Okay, so first, data processing improvement are still needed, and this is something which needs to be continued. In particular, there's still work to be done on a very precise error characterization. We'll have new satellite missions, such as high-resolution altimetry, SWOT, that will likely have a major impact, explained, on operational oceanography. We also have promising techniques for wind and wave, for example, with the CFOSAT mission, and also for new missions that could directly measure surface current from space. And Fabrice, can you tell you more on the scheme mission? Ocean color mission, so geostationary is one way to improve the coverage, and also moving to hyperspectral to have a more final scale estimation of the signal from the color of the sea. Synergy between model theories needs to be developed further, and in particular to extract the high resolution information in satellites. And this is where also there are a lot of work to be done still on. This is something, again, if you research that you could develop on how to best use satellite observation and in-situ observation in models, which is to better take into account correlated error, biases, representativity error, and so on. And in that respect, the development of observing system evaluation, observing system simulation experiment, which is done through the GODAI OceanView task team, is extremely important to define needs, quantify impacts, understand better how your system depends on observation, and also to improve ultimately your data simulation system. Thank you.